Welcome, everyone, to Season 2, Episode 6 of Level Agency's Test, Learn, Grow podcast, where we believe all marketing should create value, build trust, and inspire change. I'm your host for today, Dale Reether, Digital Marketing Lead here at Level. In this episode, we're diving back into the world of higher education marketing to talk about the new social media landscape and how institutions need to shift their strategy to focus more on emerging platforms like TikTok and Snapchat as Facebook's influence among students continues to decline a bit. So I'm joined today by my esteemed colleagues, Mr. David Batts, our VP of Agency Development and Partnerships here at the agency, and Kiefer Kopko, who is a team lead here, spearheading one of our two education vertical teams. So Dave, Kiefer, how's it going? Welcome back to the podcast.
Thanks so much. Great to be back. Appreciate the intro. Looking forward to it.
Absolutely. So we'll just dive right into it. Kiefer, I want to start with you. Really, the theme of this episode is shifting a little bit away from Facebook. Not saying that we need to do that entirely, but what have you seen with Facebook over the past year or so? Why is it declining? What have you seen amongst your education clients in terms of declining in their marketing efforts and seeing less in performance there?
Yeah, so I want to really start at the beginning, kind of lay out exactly kind of what has happened over the last couple of years. If we've watched the previous podcast episode, I went into a little bit about, where this is kind of happening and kind of how the pandemic played into it. But basically, the gist of it is, um, about 5 years ago or so, maybe a little bit longer, Facebook really kind of became a dominant force within the digital advertising space. They're, an early adopter of like conversion optimized campaigns. They gave you a lot of flexibility on like creative and placements. And for a lot of education clients in particular, and I think just people in general, Facebook became a place for them to put their marketing dollars where they might not get the highest quality results, but they would get results more than anything else. That was attractive. What I always said is it was low cost leads at marginal quality, but certainly something an admissions team can work through. Basically, since a little bit before the pandemic, but then like right after the pandemic, it started getting hit really hard. Uh, Lead quality, lead costs, they've all been going downhill. Specifically for meta generated leads. And when we're talking about meta, we're talking about Facebook and Instagram, to much lesser extent, some of the WhatsApp and Messenger stuff, but primarily Facebook and Instagram. And when we're talking about declining quality, it's not just, hey, my cost per lead is double what it used to be. It's my cost per lead is double what it used to be, and my lead to enrollment rate is half, which is just a bitter pill to swallow for a lot of people. So what we're seeing is that a lot of companies are trying to have to aggressively and reactively reallocate large segments of their budget away from Meta, just because the quality isn't there to the extent that it used to be. And at least part of that is just, really building a house on rented land, as they like to say. Like, all of these platforms can change at any moment, and the audiences can move at any moment, which that's one of the big things that's impacting Meta, especially for higher education, is that Gen Z is the one going to college now. They're the ones looking at schools, and Facebook for certainly doesn't have as much of an importance for them. Instagram is still relevant, but they're looking at other platforms. Their day-to-day usage is on other platforms. I think I read something like TikTok is one of the most used search engines in the country, even though the information is terribly inaccurate. So we got to go meet the customer where they're at more than anything else.
Yeah, you kind of read my mind there. You mentioned conversion tracking, and I was going to ask, why do you think that uh, Facebook is declining? And it sounds like the audience just isn't there. Why do you think that is? Like, why do you think that the younger generation has started to shift away from Facebook more into TikTok and Snapchat? What's the nature of the platform that is pulling those people away?
So this is going to be a little bit of theory on my end, just from my experience and kind of how I see usage trends going. But Facebook used to be a curated environment. And what that means is, like, you would sit down and you would say, I'm going to follow this page. I'm going to be friends with this person. I'm going to join this group. And your feed would be curated. It'd be all of the things you like, right? And that's really appealing to people that kind of want to create not echo chambers, but a very kind of safe spot for them to express themselves. what we're seeing with newer social media platforms, I started to see this a lot with Snapchat, with their like Discover page, and then we started seeing it more aggressively as story kind of centric media took out, and then TikTok in the pandemic just ran with it. But this idea of an algorithm and the For You page. So, Facebook was dabbling with algorithm and serving you content that you might be interested in for years, a decade now at this point. But what we really saw with like the story-based feed narrative was it was a algorithm that was heavily geared towards engagement metrics. So how much someone is watching something, how much whether or not they're watching it again or they're interacting with it in any way, all of those things became much more meaningful as we started shifting from, average active users in a month to looking at engagement time. That's how these people are looking at their apps now. So now it's focused on, it's not just, making sure you log on at least once a month. It's how many times did you log on today? And that's, I think, is the big shift. So I don't even think it's so much the audience, so as the platforms themselves providing this outlet and the audience just adapting to it more than anything else.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. So with Facebook, Kiefer, is that in your mind, is there no utility to Facebook, or is it taking on, kind of a different place in the marketing mix?
I had a cousin of mine recently say LinkedIn and Facebook were like the same. This is a much younger cousin, 15 years younger. And I was taken aback by that a little bit because I was like, they're not the same. But for the younger generation, when you've been growing up with like Snapchat and TikTok and these heavily video based, these algorithm based things that are just feeding you information, when you go back to Facebook, it just feels old. It feels dated. And it more than anything else, it doesn't feel like you can find new stuff. You have to go seek it. It's not going to be served to you on a silver platter.
Mm-hmm.
Would you mind rephrasing your question? I think I lost part of it.
Oh no, it's so the question really is more rooted in the place that Facebook has in the marketing mix. I mean, it sounds like there's an audience dimension to how Facebook is being engaged with, right? But is there a more general difference now as you think about really placing ads and managing dollars for your clients, for where Facebook could actually fit?
Yeah. So, and we're gonna go interchangeably Meta and Facebook quite a bit. So I'm gonna try to stick to using Meta as the term. But when we're looking at Meta, one of the things I tell clients is that your cost per lead is not going to be what it used to be. That's just the reality of it. But here at Level, we don't focus on cost per lead. We use it as a good driving indicator, but for education specifically, we're looking at down funnel metrics. So interviews, applications, anything like that to say that not only was this person interested, but they followed up in a truly meaningful way. There is an opportunity for Meta in your marketing mix, but it's understanding what Meta performance looks like in 2023 and not hamstringing it to what Meta performance was 5 years ago. I mean, that's the biggest thing is, and especially with COVID 2020, 2021, that data is so hard for figuring out, where you should be in terms of seasonality, in terms of where you should be year over year. We've got 2 years that were so drastically impacted that it becomes really hard to determine where does Meta exist in your media mix now. So part of that is having a really good agency that can help you kind of work through it and is looking at important metrics that are actually valuable to you and not just, hey, look how many in-platform conversions we got.
I can imagine when you're talking to clients and having that conversation, like that you can't expect what you used to get from Facebook in terms of performance, that can be a tough pill to swallow. There's probably a comfortability factor there, first of all, because it's what they know. And second of all, it's something that's been performing well for them for a long time. How do you suggest that higher ed institutions start to get out of that comfortability factor and start testing into these new platforms? Like, what are some baby steps that these institutions can start to take to see, like, hey, it's okay, we can mix this up a little bit, there is value to be had in these other platforms? What are some of the things and places that you've seen your clients have some success early on that gives that credibility and trust to invest in those channels?
The thing that everyone should start with today, if they haven't done anything else, and they're like, I want to be on TikTok today, is sign up for an account. It's interesting to see how many people just don't even have the account set up. My rule of thumb, anytime a new social media platform comes into existence, I immediately grab KJ Kopko. just in case. I never know what platform, and I never want to lose my now everyone in the is going to go out and grab KJ Kopko on everything. But I very much believe that if a platform exists and it's free and you can put your business on it, there's no reason not to. So that's day one. That's something you can do right now, and then start figuring out what the content looks like and posting on it. Now, if you're talking from the paid perspective, there's a few other things that we'll want to do. The biggest thing is, and I know we're going to go into this a little bit more on future podcasts. I guarantee Jenna has a great opinion about this, but creative is the biggest thing that you need to start with. If you're sitting there thinking, well, I'll just take my YouTube videos and I'll put them on TikTok, call it a day. We've talked about it ad nauseum on these podcasts of how that's a bad idea, right? So start with the creative. Make sure you're actually generating vertical specific creative that can work in platforms like TikTok and Snapchat and Instagram stories and all that. So that's step number one. Make sure that you have creative that is fitted to the platform. And then step number two is make sure you craft a specific test. We talk a lot about test, learn, grow here. And one of the things that is imperative when you're creating a test is you have very defined metrics around what success looks like and what failure looks like. How do we typically roll this out on our end? Is we typically will focus on a specific campus. So if we have a client, I have multiple EDU clients with several different campuses. For a TikTok test, we might look at a specific campus and say, I want to impact performance here using TikTok. All right. So we started with a specific campus first off, and then we think about how do I want to impact performance? Do I just want lead volume? Okay. TikTok cost per lead might be a little bit on the high side, especially for the first time you ever run the campaign. But if you want to look at things more holistically, which is, we have a data science department that helps us really dive in and figure out what the true impact of things are. So what we like to do is back up any kind of test like this. We'll talk about, hey, this is what we expect from a CPL, last click standpoint. This is about how many leads we expect out of this actual spend volume we're putting against it. But more importantly, we'll devise basically a mathematical model to determine what is the actual impact from these campaigns. And then we might level that into, I know we've talked a lot about, how we might use website sessions on the website. We might look at actual lead volume and the total impact of lead volume in that market since running a TikTok campaign. We might want to look at even further down and say, has this had any impact on applications where we're running nurturing campaigns? So there's a lot of different angles, but get the free account first off. Do that today if you haven't. Make sure you have creative that's ready for it. And make sure you clearly define your test both as a failure metric and as a success metric.
Yeah, I know we're going to talk about creative in a future episode with Jenna, who is an account director on one of our EDU vertical teams. But the creative piece is really polarizing for me because I think I've heard someone say this before. This is the first time that you can use the same creative format on almost literally any platform. Not to say the backwards notion of it that you just said, like you can't take YouTube and put it on TikTok, but you can take a TikTok style video and put it anywhere. Like if you're on the internet right now, it's very obvious. You could be on LinkedIn, Facebook, like that vertical video works anywhere. So I think that piece is really interesting to me. And I think the other piece that you've kind of hit on in a couple different portions of this conversation is the relevance factor. When you were talking about Facebook earlier, like it seemed like you were saying that a lot of the younger generation is privy to when they're being sold to a little bit, and like they aren't getting that personalized and authentic content from that platform anymore, which I think is why you start to see the TikTok style content starting to leak into those other platforms. But I think for higher ed, even specifically, building that trust and authenticity through the creative for that platform is huge right now.
And I think one of the things that people have to really consider is that this is why I said, the first thing you should do is sign up for an account and get that running. You need to start somewhere, and you need to try to figure out what is appealing on these platforms, and start with the people on your team and developing the content like that will appeal to the platforms. Because you're right, Generation Z in particular, they've grown up so with they're the internet first generation. They've grown up with ads everywhere at all times. They've just been inundated, so they can see right through it. It's actually interesting. I find when I go on TikTok, when people are selling you stuff, they are not hiding it. They're like, I really like this product. You should all buy this product. Here's how I use this product. Here's my Amazon affiliate link, right? And 10 years ago when I started marketing, like that was not what we were going to do. It was going to be very subtle. It was going to be like, using the product in the background, getting an influencer to always make sure our products were in camera on our Instagram and just ad nauseum. So like, there, it's a give and take for sure. You have to be a lot more transparent about, hey, I want you to come to our school because I think it'll do well for you. But in addition to that, like, you can't have advertising that's just trying to be subtle and trying to be sly, because it's not. They see right through it.
Kiefer, are you seeing different patterns for different types of prospective students? For example, with adult learners, are you seeing a similar pattern of engagement as it relates to platforms and with Meta?
Absolutely, yeah. And this is something that, working in education, I think anyone who's worked in education can tell you, like, the difference between advertising to an adult learner, a non-traditional student, a traditional student, a for-profit student, like all these different things. There's so much minutia in how you advertise to them. So absolutely, if if you're a school that has a lot of non-traditional students, like adult learner students, like, there probably still is a very strong place for you on Meta. I mean, those are the people that are still on these platforms. What I'm talking about more than anything else is people that are more of the traditional route. They graduate high school, go directly into college, more of those route. They're the people that should really be on these platforms and really be experimenting. And again, to emphasize, not giving up on Meta entirely, because there are still enrollments to be found there, but making sure that you're diversifying.
So audience matters so much when we're talking about some of the marketing implications around platform and testing, and knowing the student mix and who you're trying to reach is so central to that.
Speaking of audience, I'd like to kind of take a little bit of a different turn here. Kiefer is a media guy. I know that he wants to dig into the media portion of this. I'm really interested in hearing about what are some of the benefits and some of the pitfalls that you've seen working within TikTok and Snapchat when it comes to media tactics and the targeting capabilities. What are some things that you have seen that are really beneficial and cool? What are some that are limitations and pitfalls that you've seen?
That is a great question. And one of the things I tell every one of my clients when we're talking about TikTok is I try to go up front with everything that we've learned so far. We've tested a dozen different campaigns of TikTok within my team, across our agency, even more than that. So there have been a lot of learnings. The biggest learning I've had, and this is consistent on TikTok and Snapchat, is the creative fatigue. No one in advertising is ready for how aggressive the creative fatigue is on these platforms. In the past, you could get away with running a creative for like 6 months, even a year in some cases. Like, I have creative that is still performing strong a year later on Meta, right? Snapchat and TikTok does not have that option. The creative fatigue is less than 90 days. I mean, the swipe up rate or click through rate, whatever you want to call it, just plateaus and drops off apps. So one of the things that it requires is that you have to consistently update that creative. And creative investment is always a bitter pill to swallow. But if you want to be engaging, anyone who has used one of these platforms, if you've ever been on TikTok, you know which ads you've already seen, and you will swipe through them so quickly. I watched kids, Easter was recent, so I was with a bunch of my family. I was watching my cousins. They knew an ad. Before the little ad button came up, they just recognized it because they'd already seen it once. And that's the new environment we're competing in, right? Especially when these creators are making 6 or 7 pieces of content a day.
It's funny you say that. I was just with my niece the other day who's just turned 3, and she was tapping where the skip ad button comes up on YouTube before it was even showing up. And I was like, geez, like she knows, she's 3. So I think it just, like, again, lends itself to the authenticity piece, making it feel like it's part of the platform and not intrusive to the feed and what people want to experience while they're trying to enjoy scrolling through what it is they're scrolling through.
And Dale, I think you make a great point too on creative format, kind of going in reverse from what Kiefer had talked about, which is to say the short form video content that plays nicely on a platform like TikTok actually has, I think, a really meaningful place on a platform like LinkedIn, as an example, right? I think video snippets on LinkedIn are arguably more powerful today than some of the alternative forms of content that you'd find in a feed. So to me, there seems to be some real viability in creating strategies that might start there and build into other platforms that may be a little bit more traditional in nature or reach an audience that might be an old guy like me.
Just to jump onto the point David was making, we on my team we've switched our creative best practice where when we're doing social builds, our creative is square and vertical. We don't even touch horizontal creative anymore. Because realistically, horizontal creative has the fewest placements at this point. So it really doesn't open us up to a lot of viability. And the performance, I mean, I could go at length about the performance on 1.91 by 1 creatives. They just aren't as strong.
I think at the core of what you're saying, Dave, in terms of the snippets and delivering that short form video, is people don't want their content stream disrupted. It's about giving people the value right then and there instead of trying to drag them away from what they're doing to create value for yourself. And it could be in the form of getting a lead. It could be in the form of getting someone to your website so you can pat yourself on the back and say like, hey, I hit that KPI or got myself closer to that. Where I think we're starting to see a shift where it's give people the information, the value right there instead of trying to always get something from it.
And in doing so, you're actually building a relationship. I mean, I can even speak for, almost 50-year-old man. There are thought leaders that I follow in the platforms that I'm on from a business perspective, and I really value the short form video now. If they've established themselves and credibility with me, and they're in my feed, I check them out on a daily basis or on a frequent basis, depending on how frequently they actually put new content out there. And I'm building a relationship with them over time to the point where, like, if I'm ready to do something from a business perspective, they're in my frame of mind around a consideration set.
Absolutely. And none of that's probably getting tracked in attribution software outside of like a video view KPI, which seems to be something that people don't value as much as they probably should.
Actually, if I could jump onto that point, I think you guys are circling something extremely important here. One of the things we talked about is at the beginning is that we talked about how Facebook immediately kind of pulled out in front as a dominant lead driver, right? Because of that, everyone kind of forgot about the fact that it is actually a really strong brand awareness tool as well. So you're talking about, how many times you have to touch someone on their way to a conversion point, all that. We've done attribution. I mean, every agency has tried attribution. One of the things that Meta offers is the conversion API, which if you're out there and you don't have conversion API, give us a call, but definitely go work on getting that implemented, because that will help address a lot of the problems we're talking about specifically within Meta, and it gives you flexibility to apply it elsewhere. But there is actually a legitimate like brand awareness and kind of view through aspect to social advertising that I think has been lost over the last couple of years. We have found that when we turn off, this is anecdotal, so take it for what you will, but pretty consistently I see when we turn off social media advertising or display advertising, really, there's about a 90-day delay until we actually see what the impact of that is. And it's never a good impact. It's usually organic takes a hit, brand takes a hit, non-brand doesn't take a hit because it doesn't need to. But consistently, the things that are reliant on your brand and your brand awareness, they will take a hit after you pause these campaigns.
When you say a hit, are you talking about just the volume of leads, or are you talking about the quality of the lead as well, or both?
Generally speaking, we're talking about volume, because the quality of a brand search lead is always going to be on the stronger side. They know your brand, they're interested in your brand, and you're going to convert them. The volume is what will disappear.
I've seen something similar, like even whenever I was working on an e-commerce client a couple of years ago, we shut off display entirely. And like Kiefer said, 60 and 90 days later, brand search volume went off a cliff. You don't want to have to get to that point to prove what you're doing has value to a holdout test. And then you have to build that affinity once again. But Kiefer, I think you're exactly right. Like, I think that we've gotten to a place in marketing in general where everything needs to have an immediate ROI associated with it, where people have moved away from some of those brand tactics that are really, really important in driving long-term success. And shameless plug for a future episode, we're going to be talking about the measuring brand awareness impact, which is hard to do. But if you can do it, it really helps to drive growth for your marketing efforts.
You are like talking around my favorite topic about digital marketing. The whole, back in the day, traditional marketing, you had no insight on how things were performing, nothing was tracking, and we just kind of rolled with it. We got to this place where digital marketing started coming in and we got a lot of tracking and we got spoiled. And now we can't stand anything that doesn't have the clearest, most concise tracking. It's very unusual.
Yeah, there's got to be some sort of middle ground there that we got to meet at. And I kind of think it's starting to go that way.
So Kiefer, I mean, you kind of gave some really great guidance earlier in our conversation here, but if we were to summarize 4 or 5 things that that a marketer in a education institution needs to be conscious of as it relates to social testing and meta, what would those things be?
So the things I would encourage them to look at is make sure that you are looking past the lead level. So tracking the down funnel performance. You might only get 5 leads from Facebook, but if 4 of them turn into enrollments, I'd do that all day, right? That's less admissions time, that's less everything. So making sure that you're looking, past that initial enrollment phase, making sure that when you're rolling out a test, you're keeping an eye on your organic performance. And we were talking about how you turn off this stuff and about 90 days later, you'll see a drop off. Well, it also takes about 90 days to get it, up and running. So really making sure that you're not just looking at last click, you're not just looking at the lead level. It's what is the holistic impact? Are the leads I'm getting from this platform converting down funnel? And is this campaign or these activities, are they having any impact elsewhere? And the last part would be to implement server level tracking. It's Conversion API on the Meta side. Snapchat, TikTok, they both have services as well. Basically, you can upload your hash CRM data and it'll tell you exactly how much they interacted with people who became enrollments, which is interesting.
Very tangential question here, but topically, we're very much in the AI revolution. We're talking very frequently about how tools like ChatGPT can actually improve our marketing and make us more efficient and effective as marketers. But I'm just curious from your perspective, how you are seeing AI impact the marketing landscape from where you sit today. Certainly from a social perspective, I'm sure that has other implications, but I'm curious of your thoughts there.
So I have a story that I'll get to in a moment. The professional answer is that I think AI is going to make a lot of creative development a lot easier for people, as well as strategy. However, I think a lot of people are going to be running the same strategy. So there's going to be a case of finding a little bit more creativity, being able to read the data. The reason I say being able to read the data is because I actually had a very specific engagement with ChatGPT. As we've talked about at Level, we had an internal prize, we had an internal competition with the ChatGPT to get a business case for it. I thought, hey, why don't I give it all of my performance from the last year and it tell me how to optimize my budget? Guess where ChatGPT wanted to cut spend? Social and display all day. So that's why it is important at the end of the day to have a human. We talk about this a lot in automated bidding. You need a human to actually verify these things and look holistically at everything, because ChatGPT is never going to have the whole picture, no matter how much data you give it.
That's interesting. Why do you think it told you to cut social and display? Like, was it just looking at the metrics at like face value and not looking at it from a holistic business sense?
I'd have to double check my prompt, but I believe that what I had asked it for was give me a 12-month spending strategy divided by channel that focused on maximizing lead volume, enrollment volume, cost per lead, and cost per enrollment. So it had to balance all 4 of those things, and I didn't give it a priority. So it just tried to cram it all together. So it was like spend everything on brand search because it doesn't know there's a limit, and cut out social display entirely. So it is, part of it is the entry itself, making sure that if you're putting something into ChatGPT, it is accurate, and it reflects what you're truly trying to get out of it. But it was just funny seeing the same problem everyone keeps running into. And now we have artificial intelligence also making that decision.
Hey, if I could spend tens of thousands of dollars and get hundreds of trade name leads a day that convert to enrollments, I'd do that too, ChatGPT. So, cool. Well, I appreciate the time today, guys. So this was, if you listen to the last episode on higher education marketing, this was one of the 5 major things that our agency is focusing on right now when it comes to higher ed marketing success. Stay tuned for future episodes where we're going to dive deeper into the remaining 4. Kiefer is going to be back with us for the next one, leading into machine learning, AI, and automation, which I guess that was just a nice little preview there. And then we'll have some of our other higher ed leaders at the agency, and Jeff Roebuck and Jenna Bluedorn, back to talk about measuring the impact of brand awareness tactics, nurturing leads beyond email to drive enrollments, and investing in high quality video and user generated content. Again, touched on that a little bit here today, but we're going to really drill into that with Jenna in an upcoming episode. So if you made it this far, thanks for listening. And until next time, connect with us on LinkedIn and YouTube, where we're always sharing insightful content for marketers and growth-minded organizations alike. And we'll catch you next time.